Welcome to Get Moving TV. I'm Dr. Chris Landon and I serve as your host. I've been in Ventura County now for 25 years, and what's remarkable about this county is we have an excellent behavioral health. And we've really done a great job developing our entire healthcare agency and having them all work together. That's really what we've been working on the last year, and really the last 10 years, is bringing mental health inside a door so that it's a medical home door. It's not one that says mental on it. It says this is where you are going to get your medical care, and some of the parts of your body have to do with your mind. We work very hard on parenting and teaching parents how to give their children limits, but sometimes things are much more severe. We have a behavioral health advisory board. We have a program that we're working on to really bring some of those kids who are just getting medications and behavioral health back into their medical homes, so we can look at all of their needs. And I was fortunate enough, I think probably another 40 or 50 people were there. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got on that board.
Actually, I am the mother of 7 children. My second oldest son, McKeon, has schizophrenia, and it was quite a journey for us. I've actually had pretty extensive training in psychology, and it was still pretty traumatic along the way for both him and for us. And I realized that it's frequently an experience that parents are unprepared for.
Well, I tell my parents that I learned so much more from them, that MD is mother's degree, and if I can just listen to what they have to say, that I'll somehow figure out the answer. But they do forget to send us all to medical school and get our degrees in psychiatry before we have.
Isn't that interesting?
Before we have children. And I was saying earlier that someone asked Bill Cosby why he has 8 children, why he doesn't have 9, and he said, well, it's because I have 8, and we learn so much from every single child being different.
It is so true. Every child is such an individual, and I think that parents feel that they're supposed to have some magic, to make everything right, and especially when things go very wrong, they feel responsible, or they are just so unsure what steps to take to manage to ensure the safety of themselves and their child. And it can be traumatic for both the parents and the child. It's, a situation that we don't expect to find ourselves in when we are handed that baby, in the hospital.
Well, there are resources in Ventura County, and we've been developing more. Can you tell me, I know you're going to be baking cookies for
Casa Pacifica.
Casa Pacifica. And so we actually had the first medical clinic at Casa Pacifica. We opened it up with Harvey way back when. And still it's going on. The Angels are there.
Oh, it's such a wonderful facility. I just visited them the other day at the campus. You may be unaware, I'm sure that you probably are aware, Dr. Landon, that there is a CBO, which is community-based organization, end of Casa Pacifica as well. And they provide services to the community that are really numerous. If a child has a suicide type crisis in the county and they're called, they're the ones that answer that call. They have a crisis response team that comes out, and that is actually on the safety plan that we've developed for parents. It's in levels according to escalation of the behavior of the child. And if they're getting up to the point where the need is significant, Casa Pacifica offers services that definitely can help to keep the parents from having that become a serious crisis.
Well, so much of what happens ends up in the emergency room, and we'll talk about some of your experiences. And the county just has received a grant to have a psychiatric emergency room, so you're not sitting there with someone who's having their bipolar episode or an attempted suicide or whatever else. So now I know with your family there's also another organization you're very involved in with NAMI. Can you tell me a little bit about NAMI, and then we'll get back to what parents need to know?
Sure. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It's nationwide, but Ventura County obviously has our own chapter. They offer services to families and to individuals at no cost. And that includes family-to-family classes that go for 12 weeks to teach families or loved ones of people who have mental illnesses about the various aspects of having a loved one with mental illness. And that's a wonderful opportunity that they give to families, and the families can get together. They learn that they're not alone. There's so much stigma surrounding mental illness. So unfortunate, because it touches so many of our lives, and yet we feel so alone when it happens. So the National Alliance on Mental Illness offers these family-to-family classes. They offer programs that operate in the schools. They have one called Parents and Teachers as Allies that they're just kicking off here in Ventura County. And we actually can go in and can train educators to look for the symptoms of mental illness so that they're a little bit more prepared, you know, when they recognize that a child might have something that's going on a little more than the typical adolescent behavior.
Well, what kind of advice would you have? So in terms of escalation, we've talked a little bit. So at what point do you call the police? What point do you call 911? When do you call an ambulance? And so what to tell us, as you've worked with your committee and so forth, to take their experience, strength, and hope and put it onto a sheet, what kinds of things have you come to?
We have a wonderful woman at Behavioral Health named Pam Roach, and she has worked very diligently on preparing the safety plan for parents. And like I said, it operates according to level of escalation. If a child is in the process of a sincere threat to causing damage to a person or to property, that's when you're going to have to call 911. And when you call 911, you need to request a crisis intervention team. And obviously, parents who had never been in this situation would not know that. So we're hoping that pediatricians can help us to disseminate the safety plan to parents, recognizing that at some point it may be necessary for them to check and say, well, my child is at this level. You know, they're just now beginning to show signs of threatening. They're just beginning to skip school. They're showing these behaviors that the parents are concerned about. In that case, they can call United Parents, which is a wonderful organization in Camarillo. And parents who have been through experiences with their own children can offer them advice. And then if it should happen to become a little bit worse, then Costa Pacifica, as we mentioned, has a crisis response team that can come directly to the home and can help those parents to deal with the situation in many different ways. So,
what a blessing there. Well, how can we help to support NAMI in your program? We'll do it through education, work with the schools. Do they have any fundraisers or walks? Seems like I've walked along an ocean.
Yes. Actually, on May 3rd, which is a Saturday, we have the annual NAMI fundraising walk. Everyone is invited. It's really a wonderful activity. And we raise money for NAMI to offer all of these services to families at no charge. And it's a favorite thing of our family. My husband and my son and I all participate really heavily in NAMI. And we believe very much in its ability to reduce stigma and to change the lives of people who have been really impacted by mental illness. So the walk is on May 3rd. We encourage everyone that can to come and to walk with us. It's a beautiful walk. It must be the best walk of any NAMI chapter along the Ventura County Boardwalk. And so it's really nice, and it raises money for a wonderful cause.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And Ventura, we're going to be right back, but it's time for you to get moving on that walk. Ventura, welcome back. We've been hearing about the impact on a family of having someone suffering from mental illness in the home and having to interact with the police department in ways that we never thought we'd have to. My next guest is Michael Ellington, who ended up in the police department. And Michael, how did you end up in the police department?
As a young boy watching television coverage of the Watts riots in '65, I saw what I felt to be disturbing images on television. So I decided, instead of railing about or complaining about the police department from the outside, I joined the department and be a change agent. So that's what I did.
So how, as you went through the police department, in terms of mental illness, what kind of training do policemen get? You and I have talked before, just you never really know what happened at the time it was happening.
Right.
And so it's easy to look back and blame someone. But what kind of, how do you get people calm? How do you get them to walk into a situation where you have someone who is mentally ill, who is making threats to themselves or others? And what kind of training do you give? I know you've been worked with the police academy in terms of trying to get this across. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I worked in corrections for the department for years, which meant I was always inside a jail somewhere, never on the street, and which can be sometimes in some ways more difficult. It involved a lot of communication skills, which meant speaking to that, what a friend of mine calls the well core that's in the middle of everyone, that is sane and wants to hear what you want to say. And it becomes this balancing act of making them want to do what it is you lawfully want them to do. So it works out by appealing to that well core, being non-threatening, and being the person that is the one voice that they want to communicate to, want to communicate with. And I found myself getting very good at it because I'm 6'4", 240 pounds. So I play against type. I step in a situation and I come in very softly, and I'm not using any threatening movement. And it seems to calm them down because I'm not pushing any buttons. I may be wearing the same uniform, but I'm not posing what they might consider to be pressure or threat. And it tends to work out 98% of the time.
Now, when you're working with rookies or your fellow officers, you get enough on the street sometimes. It's your adrenal gland is so big, it doesn't take much to get your heart rate up and your eyes dilated and your brain working too fast. How do you get to that common core? How do you work with people to find that, the humanity that you found, who maybe they're not 6'4" and 240 pounds, but...
We try to help them there too. No, but there's a concern that one has to have. And the concern is, in addressing the well core, you have to address your own. Stephen Covey, a business management guru for years, said things like, seek first to understand, then to be understood. So if you're trying to understand where this distressed person is coming from, it makes it easier for them to understand what you need them to do. And it becomes their idea to do it because they have a connection with you now. What I found to be true is to take the ego out of the equation was the easiest way to do this, and make sure people understood what our use of force policy was. And use of force policies among departments tend to be very similar. And it's used that amount of force, or only that amount of force necessary to overcome resistance. And when they decrease their resistance, you decrease your force. And sometimes some people have a hard time getting a handle on that. But it's keeping them in touch with that allows their own adrenaline to relax, their own heart rate to come down, and stay focused on the rapport and the goal as opposed to the fight.
You know, I at one point was trying to encourage the county to take care of the healthcare needs of everyone in our prisons, and someone said, well, gee, they forgot to keep their payments up on their pre-prisoner health insurance, and oftentimes they have bad hearts, bad teeth, bad. So criminals, of course, forget to go to don't bait the cop school.
Oh, yes.
Too. So how do you get through that? Since you were in corrections, is there anything that happens inside the jails now? We have Todd Road Jail here, and I've seen a lot of changes from California Rehabilitation Center for Men out in Pomona, and a lot of changes from some of the bigger prisons. So how have things changed inside? How do you prepare people to leave prison and have a different way of interacting with the police?
Well, the system I worked in was a pre-arraignment system, so nobody we had there was sentenced. Everybody was pre-arraignment. So quite literally, everybody was innocent until proven guilty. And they will tell you that if you ask them. They were all put in a position that found them being arrested, or to use the street parlance, they caught a case. It doesn't matter, they were in a store with a gun in their hands pointing in someone's face, they caught a case, or they've got me in jail. Nothing they did got them there. A lot of people don't want to take responsibility or be accountable for their actions. The system did it to them. But once they're inside, there's a remarkable metamorphosis that starts to happen, and I worry about some of this. There are people who are institutionalized. They can't function on the street, so they find themselves in the middle of that recidivistic cycle, coming back to jail again and again. And they function based on, I'll do this crime and I'll use this kind of weapon because it'll only get me this much time. And there's a whole math formula that goes with that. But beyond that, after they've been to court and they've been sentenced, then they go to a county system or to a federal system, and the mindset is, in there, quite honestly, is survival. They're trying to figure out how they're going to, what role they're going to play in that environment and just survive to do their time.
Well, so much of what we see on television, I guess, since I'm not a big television watcher, no disrespect, is trying to figure The Wire or whatever, is trying to figure out how those societies work. How do those societies work? You have someone who's heading the gangs, heading the inner gangs. You've got the different Aryan brothers and the Latino gangs and so forth. I don't see how anyone survives in there with those circumstances. People
figure a way to do it. There is pressure to join a gang of one kind or another. And the kinds of gangs you see operate on the street operate in prison. And there are gangs in the military right now. There is one set I know of within the Marine Corps, and that's an embarrassment to the Corps, and they're dealing with that. But they operate everywhere. And either you resist or you comply to some degree that allows you to be all right with your conscience and do whatever's minimal to keep them off from pressuring you to do more, and you survive. That's what I've seen, that's what inmates I've talked to have told me. But to go back to something you said earlier about surviving, it was interesting. The way I came to this profession was because of a woman I knew who worked as part of a pet team. And she told me about this opportunity. I took it, and it started a 35-year career for me. What's interesting about talking to people, and she was the one that told me about the well core, and it stuck with me, it made sense. What's interesting, in longer stay facilities, schizophrenics, say for example, specifically, generally they're not taking their meds on the outside. They're not paying their pre-prison health care coverage. So they're off their meds. They go to jail, they get on their meds, they become regular, and especially with schizophrenics, they become more likely to commit suicide because they now see how messed up their lives are, and then they get doubly depressed. Jails can be scary places, and the likelihood that someone will commit suicide in a jail goes up 10 times once that door closes. And it's add on diseases, add on mental issues that can go higher, especially if they've tried to commit suicide prior. So some of the training I still do after I've retired from the department speaks to suicide prevention for smaller agencies that are still grappling with these issues.
And so what kind of training is that?
This is state mandated training that talks to correctional personnel and sworn personnel about indicators to watch for, situations that have to do with housing in terms of lessening the likelihood that someone will be able to successfully commit suicide.
So how do people, so they fit back in the community in a more controlled housing? We in La Colonia, which is here in Oxnard, we had the Dallas Cowboys come over the summer, and the chosen uniform of the gangbangers was the Dallas Cowboys, Dallas Cowboy license plate, Dallas Cowboy. And we took a look, just in terms of the health aspects and how it affects society, is just look at we looked at the rate of asthma, and found that the rate of asthma was highest in the places where there's the most violent crime. And so we, myself and others obviously, went to the city of Oxnard and said, we need to stop the gangs. It's got to be a curfew, and the biggest thing we came up with was no more Dallas Cowboy uniforms. And I got to go on a ride along where there it was, Dallas Cowboy sheets, like we had a 5-year-old child, and AK-47s and everything else underneath the bed. So how do you get a step ahead of that? You've been in Los Angeles. How do you get a step ahead of, they told me, gosh, Dr. Lennon, if we took everyone in these 10 blocks who was ever in a gang, that would be every grandma, every grandpa, every aunt, every uncle, every child would be gone.
It tends to be generational, and that's the tragedy of it, but it's about breaking the cycle. And a number of the ways police departments use to interface with the community in a real way is to break that cycle. One of the ways is DARE. DARE started with LAPD, unless I'm mistaken. It was a way to get to school children and talk to them about drug abuse resistance education, stepping away from that. And that's one of the entry ways little people get into gangs. It's what's attractive about drug dealers, the flashy cars, the wads of money, the bling bling. But what these little people don't see is these guys don't live long, because somebody's going to be warring over their turf, their customers, their supply, and it looks good while it's rolling, but it's a dangerous lifestyle.
And we're sending, we're part of, we have Ventura Global Health, and we're sending a group down to Honduras. Tegucigalpa, where we're sending them, is the #2 murder capital in the world, and San Pedro Sula, which is the airport they'll fly into first, is the #1 murder capital in the world. And for that country, one of the things we hope to have them bring back is they have an Institute of Violence. The university studies violence in society. Dr. Castellanos, who heads it, her son was kidnapped by the police and murdered. The police culture there, El Tigre, is the macho head, and at night cars go out, and if you are a gangbanger, they'll shoot you. So it's a little more than
Outreach.
Outreach, yeah. So in terms of outreach, what else is the LAPD and the police academy, how else are they reaching out in the community?
Well, what's interesting is it starts even before officers get into cars or into the jails. What happens is the testing program and the selection process is based on the best possible members of society within a certain area, because we want the force to be reflective of the population it serves.
Well, thank you for all. This has been very helpful for me. Now, there's some other things that you've done. You know, we were talking earlier about we need to get our audio up and your television voice, and you seem to have a very nice television voice. What, besides the police work, what other career have you pursued? I
do a lot of voiceovers, and have done voiceovers for film, for commercials, a lot of technical voiceovers for engineering firms, things like that. And I work with a couple of production companies that do special galas and dinners and things like that. There was a Catholic university, which will go nameless, who was having rather an interesting fundraiser. And I remember, well, the position I occupy when I do these kinds of things is called VOG, which means Voice of God on the call sheet. It's the public address announcer you never see, but you hear this voice that hopefully is commanding. So there's a Monsignor and a bishop standing on the stage next to a lighting director, and I'm in the booth and I'm hearing them talk, and the Monsignor wants to get this bishop a microphone because he needs to be heard, and the lighting director is trying to figure out how to finish lighting this thing, and he's putting this guy off, and he's not taking it kindly. So he says, just wait a minute, I'll be with him in a minute, let me get one more sound level and I'll be right with you. So he says, can we now hear the voice of God? So the Monsignor looked a little stunned, you're going to hear God? So I said, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your only opportunity, and I said a few other things to give them a level. And the Monsignor looked scared, and he said, who was that? He said, that was the voice of God. He said, where is he? He said, well, it's your boss, don't you know? So I mean, that went over real well at a Catholic university. But.
So what are some other fun kinds of things? I know you have done the BMW commercials and Mazda and so forth. How does someone get into that as a career? Do you have an agent? Do you have a?
I have a secret agent. He doesn't know who I am, and I don't call him. But I'm in the process of securing representation right now. It's all been word of mouth, and because the community tends to be very small of voiceover folks, especially animation. That's an even smaller coterie of people that do that. But breaking in, it can be as simple as going to the internet and looking for voiceover classes. And there are clinics and workshops conducted all over the county, both counties, all these counties up and down the coast, because California is seen as Hollywood. And it can be just that simple, but understanding what you have and developing it.
I know I'd said, gosh, we'll meet up at noon, and you said, well, I'm going to get there 11:45, and 11:46 as I turned the corner, there you were. So I imagine being prompt and on time and makes a big difference.